Welcome, Delegate Henson. Thank you for coming. Zainab, do you believe we're ready to begin?
I would give it maybe a couple more minutes. I'm getting some messages from community members who are saying that they are joining. So let's just give it maybe another minute or so to give folks a chance to sign on.
Okay. Welcome, Delegate Shetty. Okay, we will be beginning soon. I just wanted to remind all the panelists to mute themselves so there's less of an echo and so we can hear everyone's voice smoothly. Okay, guys, we will begin our event. Good afternoon, assalamu alaikum, and welcome. My name is Huzaifa Mohammed.
And my name is Nirma Naid.
And we will be your co-moderators for today's event.
On behalf of the Maryland office of the Council on American Islamic Relations, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to our 2021 virtual Maryland Muslim Lobby Day. CARE is America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization.
Well, this isn't exactly how we imagined to be holding our lobby day this year. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed a lot in our lives over the last year. And until it's under control, we wanted all of you to be able to participate in our Muslim Lobby Day, whether it be in person or whether it be virtually. But before we get into Lobby Day, we'd like to know a little bit more about you. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, what county or city you're from, and one issue that matters to you during virtual Lobby Day.
This year's virtual event is being co-hosted by our partner organizations, including the United Maryland Muslim Council, Justice for All, and the International Campaign for the Rohingya.
Today, we'll be highlighting some key legislative priorities that impact or of interest to many of the 200,000 American Muslims of all backgrounds and ethnicities who call Maryland home. We will also be hearing from lawmakers who have taken time out of their weekends to be here with us. But before we hear from our sponsoring organizations, I wanna give Dr. Makbul Patel the floor to recite a dua and say a few words.
السلام عليكم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد، أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. I will now continue and we'll hear briefly from our sponsoring organizations.
Jazakallah khair. Our first speaker will be Zainab Chaudhry, Director of CARE's office in Maryland.
Zainab, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great, fantastic. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Nima and Huzaifa. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to this year's virtual Muslim Lobby Day in Maryland. CARE would also like to acknowledge our partner organizations as well as our elected leaders who took the time out of their weekend, Super Bowl weekend, which we know is only a couple hours away. We promise we won't hold you too long. I understand some folks want to definitely tune into the game, but we're really excited to have you here with us. As you all are aware, lobbying plays a huge role in urging our lawmakers to take specific actions on policy and on matters of public interest. And when we talk about specifically, what our government's positions and actions are as they pertain to the general public and the laws that it enacts to apply to all of us, lobbying is a critical way to influence legislative action that helps shape those laws. Many people don't realize that the practice of lobbying is actually protected by the First Amendment, as our constitutional right to be able to lobby and be able to make sure that issues that we care about are being highlighted. It's an important part of a productive government, and not the least because it acts as an educational tool. Our strength is in our numbers, and there's tremendous power in collectively voicing our concerns and unifying ourselves to move towards a specific issue that our communities are concerned about or interested in. Each year, as Huzaifa mentioned earlier, the Maryland General Assembly introduces and considers thousands of bills in state legislature. And lobbying really sort of enables us to prioritize some of those key issues that affect and concern us and place them on our lawmakers' radars. And, a lot of times people think about what lobbying is, and, it can seem pretty overwhelming and pretty complicated, but it's actually a very simple process. It's a 3-step process that consists of writing emails and scheduling calls and meetings with lawmakers' offices, identifying the issues that are on our agenda, and making the case with 3 or a few key points of why you support that particular position. And many of you have probably already actually lobbied without even realizing that you were lobbying at the time. And it's actually really fun once you start doing it more often, because the more we do it, the more we realize how much of a role we have to play in shaping public policy and really kind of making sure our community's interests and concerns are being heard. While there are dozens of bills on our radar this session, as Huzaifa and Nima mentioned earlier, we recognize, recovering from the devastating impact of the coronavirus pandemic is naturally a top priority this year. Our team is going to break down the key issues in addition to that our organizations collectively, our coalition is focusing on. We do want to take a moment and pause and just acknowledge the tremendous toll that this horrific pandemic has taken on Marylanders across the strait and people around the world. So many families are suffering, and our hearts go out to all of those families who are suffering the loss of a loved one or who are worried about the health and well-being or the economic impact of this horrific pandemic. And we pray for you and your families as well. The top priorities that we are going to be discussing legislatively today are going to be related to hate crimes and racism, to criminal justice and police reform, which is a key issue this year in state legislature following the murder of so many different brothers and sisters who have been murdered at the hands of police violence last year and beyond. Also, ending genocide and protecting immigrants' rights are also key issues that we are concerned about. So to our attendees and community members, we encourage you to take notes. We encourage you to do your research, not just take our word for it, but also do your own, kind of investigation on these particular topics. Learn your district and representatives in office if you don't already know who they are. Many of you probably already do, and we're so glad to know that there's a growing number of our community members who are politically and civically engaged and who know who their representatives are, know exactly what district they live in, and they're going to be ready to hit the ground running when it comes time to talk to their representatives about these issues. And at the conclusion of this event, we hope that you will feel empowered and motivated and energized to begin writing those emails, to begin making those phone calls, and urging your state representatives, both state senators and your delegates, to take the right position on these issues, right? These issues, ending genocide, making sure our tax dollars do not go to support genocide or human rights violations in so many different parts of the world, is really something that each and every one of us have an opportunity to have an impact on. Making sure that law enforcement agencies are being held accountable, that there's transparency and accountability when there is abuse taking place by police officers, impacting specifically African-American communities and people of color. This is something that each and every one of us have an opportunity to impact change on. So the legislative facts of all of these bills will be emailed out to all of the participants who registered this weekend. And if you don't receive it, we encourage you to email us at mdoutreach@care.com. And Josefa will be sharing that email in the chat box. That email is mdoutreach@care.com. And we'll make sure that you receive a copy of this legislative fact sheets so that when you do reach out to lawmakers, you have a better idea of what some of these issues are. So once again, without taking too much time, thank you all so much again for joining us. Special thank you to our lawmakers who are joining us on a Sunday on their typical day off to make sure that they are also listening to our community's concern. We're so glad to have you here with us. And thank you to our attendees who are the most important part of bringing transformative change in our state. Each and every single one of you have a tremendous role to play in bringing about change, and we hope that you feel empowered to do so at the conclusion of this event. And Josefa, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Zainab, for those thoughtful remarks. Our next speaker will be Dr. Shahid Rafiq, who is president of the United Maryland Muslim Council. Dr. Rafiq, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zephyr. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and good afternoon. For all the respected attendees, and in particular our elected representative of Maryland State. I will not take much of the time because I myself am very interested in other lawmakers here who will be talking later on not only the lobbying efforts that we have the bills on the agenda, but also how Muslim community, which is a big part of the Maryland, and Muslims are everywhere from healthcare to IT to business and teachers and firefighters, how they can be helped to be more engaged. This is what we are doing, all the organizations, including UMMC and CARE. But I would like to hear from most of you or each one of you as to how we can achieve our goals. So briefly, United Maryland Muslim Council is an umbrella organization of different counties, Muslim councils in the state, and we represent about 350,000 Muslims in the state from 60 different countries. And 65% of us are immigrants, but 35% are indigenous. And so, most of you, as you know, the Muslims are not a monolithic cultural background, although the religion is one, but the cultural background, races and languages are different. So our vision is that we achieve social, political, and economic development for all of our Muslim constituents and make a very cohesive societies in the communities in our beloved states. And we achieve it by encouraging our Muslim colleagues and neighbors to participate in the activism, in the civic engagement, in political engagement. United Maryland Muslim Council has been very successful in engaging communities in different, we do different projects as well as different functions. We do every 2 years a community big gala with the governors, and this legislative night every year is happening for the past many years. And again, the governor's house Ramadan Iftar is a big event, but we have participated in all the different elections at local level and national level, as well as Zainab mentioned, COVID pandemic was a once in a lifetime thing that happened to everyone. And we did food drives, we did awareness. We recently had with the collaboration of Maryland Health Department, a webinar for our community awareness and how to achieve the vaccinations. So
Thank you,
I
Dr.
will stop here. And thank you very much for all the attendees and lawmakers to come on this Sunday night. Thank you. Rami.
Thank you, Dr. Shahid, for those remarks. Our next speaker will be Mr. Michael Delong. He's with the International Campaign for the Rohingya. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael DeLong. I live in Silver Spring, and I'm a volunteer for the International Campaign for the Rohingya. The director, Simon Villanis, he apologizes for not being able to make it. He is busy advocating right now on their behalf and against the military coup, and in fact, may actually be in a protest right outside the embassy. I've started volunteering because several years ago when I interned for Senator Jeff Merkley, a couple of Rohingya activists came to our office and spoke about the persecution that their people were undergoing. I was very moved and decided to try and get involved and help out however I can. And over the past couple of years, Simon and I and our other grassroots organizers, we've been advocating for a bill called the Maryland End Genocide Bill. Basically, it directs the state government to enter into contracts with only those corporations that have adopted a formal policy of refusing to do business with governments that engage in genocide or crimes against humanity. It requires the state treasurer to ensure that any shares held by the state are voted in favor of shareholder resolutions saying companies should not do business with any governments that engage in genocide in order to help the Rohingya. And so it pushes the state of Maryland to use its power to try and stop genocide. It also establishes a commission on genocide prevention to research which governments are doing this and identify corporations that do business with those governments and stop them. And I've been reaching out on behalf to a whole bunch of legislators. Some of you on the call have already signed on to the bill, for which I thank you. And we are continuing to reach out. The bill number is HB 533, and our sponsor is Delegate Gabriel Acevedo. So thank you very much to him and his office. And HB 533 is being heard by the House Health and Government Operations Committee on Wednesday, February 17th at 1:30 p.m. We are planning to write testimony in support of the bill and testify virtually. We'd love for other folks to join us as well. And I am happy to answer any questions, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Michael. The End Genocide Bill is actually one of CARE's legislative priorities, so we'll definitely be discussing that as well. Our last speaker is Henna Zubairi, Sister Henna Zubairi with Justice for All. Sister Henna, are you there?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for arranging and doing all this behind the scenes hard work. It's amazing to see these young people leading, and just fills my heart with joy. And I'm just really, really impressed, mashallah. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Henna Zubairi. I'm the director of Justice for All DC office. Justice for All was formed in the aftermath of the Bosnia genocide. We've been working on anti-genocide causes around the world for over 25 years. Kosovo, Khar Republic. And currently, for the past 12 years, our focus has been Burma under the Burma Task Force. Some of those Rohingya advocates that, Michael, you probably met, we brought them in and flew them in from around the country to come to DC to be able to engage in lobbying and advocacy. We also run the Save Uyghur campaign because there's a genocide taking place currently against the Uyghur people in East Turkestan, which is called Xinjiang by the Chinese government, as well as we run this Save India from Fascism campaign and this Free Kashmir Action because India has 2 genocide alerts against it. So some of the bills that have come up and that CARE is sponsoring, we are 100% in agreement with them. One of the things that I wanted to share as a mom with a child in high school is the special need to take away school resource officers and bring in mental health counselors. This is an absolute need of the hour, especially after the pandemic. We need more mental health resources for our young people. I would like to also briefly comment that we often hear back about the End Genocide Bill, that this is a foreign policy bill and what state officials cannot get involved with this. I just want to make this absolutely clear. We do a lot of foreign policy advocacy on the Hill, but this particular bill does not conduct foreign policy. It does not involve Maryland in the conduct of foreign policy. The bill simply requires the state government to change its own internal procurement and investment policies and practices. And the bill does not involve the state of Maryland in any interaction with any foreign government. So I wanted to reiterate that for our lawmakers and staffers who are here today. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sister Henna, for your remarks. Just want to say thank you again to our sponsoring organizations. Now I want to provide you guys with a brief overview of the Maryland General Assembly. So the Maryland General Assembly is the legislative body of the state of Maryland. It meets for 90 days each year. The legislative session is from January to April. Its main tasks are to act on bills, pass the state's annual budget, and oversee state government agencies. The Maryland General Assembly is divided into 47 legislative districts across the state of Maryland, and each district is represented by 1 state senator and 3 state delegates. It's a bicameral body with 2 chambers. The Senate has 47 members, and the House of Delegates has 141 members. Members are elected to serve a 4-year term, and during each legislative session, which is from January to April every year, around 2,000 to 3,000 bills are introduced.
Now let's talk about which district you live in. If you know which district you live in, let's see you digitally raise your hand in Zoom. So I'll give you like 10 seconds to raise your hand if you know which district. Oh, wow, that's so good. Okay, great. So for the rest of us, we're gonna do a really quick exercise and you can follow along if you can see on the screen. If you open your browser window and type in the URL that you see, which is mdelect.net, and enter in your home address, you'll be able to locate both your district and the representatives. Once you find that, and we'll give you like 30 seconds to a minute to do so. If you could drop your district name and district number and bonus points if you can get the name of your representative in the chat. Is everyone able to find that browser? Oh, yay. Okay, great. I see everyone putting in their district number and names. That's excellent. Oh, wow. so good. MashaAllah. A very informed group. MashaAllah.
Okay, well, now that everyone knows what district you live in and who your representatives are, I want to dive right into the 10 key bills that are part of our legislative priorities for this session. So the 4 focus areas that CARE is taking is police and criminal justice reform, ending support for genocide, hate crimes and racism, and immigration. And as you can see, we have 10 legislative priorities that we're going to go over.
So the first bill we're going to discuss is House Bill 533, which is the Prevention of Genocide and Crimes Against Humanity and the Commission on Genocide Prevention. The Maryland End Genocide Bill will direct the state government to enter into contracts with only those corporations that have adopted a formal policy of refusing to do business with governments that engage in genocide or crimes against humanity. This bill requires the state treasurer to ensure that any shares held by the state are voted in favor of the shareholder resolutions that ask companies to adopt this policy of refusing to do business with governments that engage in the aforementioned genocide or crimes against humanity. Some key reasons to support this bill is that our state should not be in the business of supporting genocide and human rights abuses in any way. Also, there is precedent. In the 1990s, over 100 corporations withdrew from Burma or Myanmar after Massachusetts and 20 cities passed laws effectively boycotting companies doing business in the country. Also in the 2000s, the Save Darfur campaign mobilized pressure on oil companies in Sudan. Today, the fossil fuel divestment campaign is succeeding in mobilizing state and local government to tackle climate change.
The second bill on CARE's legislative priorities is Senate Bill 494, which is cross-filed with House Bill 409, prohibiting a court from imposing a life sentence for a minor without the possibility of parole or release. What this does is what this legislation does is it authorizes a court, it prohibits a court from imposing a life sentence on a minor who is under 18 years old by definition, and doesn't let them impose a life sentence on them without the possibility of parole or release. Some reasons to support this bill is because no child should be sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole or release.
The next bill, Senate Bill 136, and House Bill 315, which is prohibiting a law enforcement officer from interrogating a child without notifying their parent or guardian and attorney. This legislation would require a police officer who takes a child into custody to provide notice to the child's parents, guardian, or custodian in a reasonable manner, and mandates that the notice include the child's location, the reason for the custody action, and instructions on how to make an immediate in-person contact. And also prohibits the interrogation of a child by a police officer until the child has spoken with their attorney and a notice has been provided to the child's parent, guardian, or custodian. Some reasons to support this bill is that the rights of children in police custody must be protected. Children can easily be manipulated and do not fully understand their situation. This is especially true if the minor has a mental disability or cognitive limitation. One case that really brought light to this issue was the case of the Central Park Five, who were wrongly convicted of the rape of a jogger when they were teenagers. It's a high-profile case that proves that criminal justice reforms are necessary to prevent children's own incarceration.
House Bill 418 is another legislative priority for CARE. What this bill would do is it requires each county board of education to adopt a formal policy prohibiting the use or display of a symbol of hate under certain circumstances in regards to apparel, backpacks, etc. One exception to this bill is that it would allow these symbols of hate to be used with education purposes regarding the education behind these symbols. Some reasons to support this bill is because school systems across the state have already began taking steps to address the numerous cases of hate symbols and graffiti reported on school property. These policies would also ensure that schools are a welcoming space for students of all ethnicities, genders, and races.
The next key bill is House Bill 151, which is repealing the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights to seek transparency and accountability in policing. This bill aims to repeal the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, or LEOBR, in Maryland that grants extensive protections to police officers that prohibit civilian review boards from being able to do their job effectively and interferes with transparent investigations into allegations of misconduct. Maryland was the first state in America to enact an LEOBR in the early 1970s. Today, 16 states have some such law, but Maryland's enactment is the most expansive of all. Some reasons to support this bill is that it will bring our state one step closer to comprehensive police reform that is desperately needed to restore faith within the criminal justice system. It will also restore bodily eroded community trust in law enforcement and ensure that good officers are not wrongly maligned.
House Bill 3306 is clarifying that certain false statements to a law enforcement officer can constitute the basis for a certain hate crime. Many hate crimes, some of them are actually when someone calls the police on a person of color for no good reason. And these 911 calls are a waste of precious resources and tax dollars. They also endanger the lives especially of people from communities of color who are impacted by these useless 911 calls.
Next is Senate Bill 178, House Bill 120, which is limiting the state's partnership with national efforts to enforce federal immigration laws. This bill aims to limit Maryland's cooperation and partnership with national efforts to enforce immigration law. The United States Immigration Detention Program, operated by ICE, is the largest of its kind in the world. Individuals in the ICE detention center are deprived of basic liberty, access to a lawyer, and access to loved ones. And according to the Cato Institute, 21 people died while in ICE custody in 2020 alone. ICE detention facilities endanger lives and reinforce a system of oppression counter to the democratic principles in our county. ICE has contracts with many local governments that it uses to operate in its detention centers, including 3 here in Maryland, in Howard, Frederick, and Worcester counties. It declares that Maryland will not support the targeting of immigrants, Muslims, and others. It restores community trust in our law enforcement, it improves public safety, and it curtails the spending of local dollars on federal enforcement efforts.
Next, we have House Bill 496, redirecting $10 million a year SRO funds to student mental health and restorative approaches for districts to hire counselors and staff for trauma-informed practices. I actually testified on this bill on behalf of CARE about a little less than a week ago. So what this bill will do, it will redirect $10 million a year towards students' mental health services, such as hiring counselors, social workers, and school psychologists. And this will create a better and improved trauma-informed conflict response mechanism. It will also create a better mental health environment for the students. Some reasons for supporting on this: current policies and legislation have constituted harmful schooling policing models and fueled the school to prison pipeline, which actually affects Black and Brown communities disproportionately.
Now that we've laid out our key bills that we're urging lawmakers to support, we are delighted to invite the lawmakers who could join us today to briefly share their remarks. In the interest of time, also to please limit them to 2 to 3 minutes each.
Nima, I think we have to go over 2 more bills.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh.
No worries.
Okay, my bad. I'm trying to speed this along. Gotta watch the Super Bowl. Next is Senate Bill 178 and House Bill 120, which is allowing the public release of materials related to any investigation of misconduct against an officer. This bill aims to make investigations into police misconduct transparent by reforming the Public Information Act. Maryland currently ranks among the least transparent states with regard to police misconduct complaints. 29 other states make disclosure of complaint files more accessible to the public. Even conservative states like Alabama, Georgia, and Arizona, police disciplinary records are generally available to the public. Some reasons to support is that transparency is necessary for community trust. Secrecy undermines community trust in police at a time when police departments should really be mending and improving their relationships with the communities that they've sworn to protect.
And lastly, we have House Bill 139, authorizing a person to seek certain relief for use of force by a law enforcement officer. So what this bill aims is to define the use of force guidelines exercised by law enforcement officers. As we've seen for the past 1 or 2 years, there has been excessive use of force by many law enforcement officers. And this bill will also contain clear distinctions between the terms lethal and non-lethal techniques. And some reasons to support this bill is because this bill will improve general community trust in law enforcement, and it will provide a measured approach in a manner that protects and preserves human life.
Okay, now that we've laid out our key bills that we're urging lawmakers to support, we're delighted to invite the lawmakers who could join us today to briefly share their remarks. And again, in the interest of time, please limit them to 2 to 3 minutes each. So the first lawmaker is Senator, I'm sorry if I mispronounced, Guy Guzon.
Hello, how y'all doing? It's good to be with you all. Unfortunately, I came in, I think mid-term on your presentation. Let me just say, in general, I'm the chair of the Budget Committee in the Senate, so the vast majority of my work this year has been focused on COVID relief and how we're responding to the crisis, which is really kind of a broad statement that has to do with all kinds of things, including concerns that we already have with regard to more funding for mental health, education, investments, all those kinds of things. But in general, what I saw from the bills that you were presenting, they seem to be most of them, at least where I caught, related to social justice and police reform and those questions. And the simple answer is there's going to be a package that comes out of both the House and the Senate, and I'm very supportive of all those measures. Look forward to seeing what ultimately comes out of those committees, but I know that I'll be supporting the package as it comes out. Other than that, again, it's really about focusing on how we set our communities up for success in lots of different ways. And that's what I'll be focusing on, continue to focus on with the budget. Spent actually most of today working on a relief plan and negotiating with various entities to get that accomplished. And I hope that it will help the business community and individuals all across the board. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I thank you for putting this together, and it's always good to be with you. I have a great relationship with your community in Howard County. We've been doing a lot of things for many years, including, I'm thinking way back to after 9/11 and what we did to secure, and what time the county executive did to secure protection, and then what the community did in terms of their commitment to helping everyone with food drives. And it's just been a great relationship for many, many years. I look forward to continuing that relationship. So thank you.
Senator Gazzoni, we want to express our appreciation for you taking time out of your Sunday to be here today with us and to share your thoughts on these measures. And thank you for everything that you do every day just to move our county forward, especially in these very difficult times. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Guzon. Next, I want to invite Senator Hedelman to give her remarks.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you for being here on your busy Sunday too. I'm sure it's not easy to be away from your family and other obligations this afternoon. I am going to echo much of what Senator Gazzoni said. I am on the Judicial Proceedings Committee, so we are in the midst of considering right now the police reform bills. I invite you to join us if you would like to watch the workshop that we've been having on them. The Police Accountability Work Group is meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and you can look at the Maryland General Assembly website if you're interested in watching that discussion. Tomorrow, actually, we will be considering the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, I believe is before the group where a couple different groups of stakeholders will come together and really kind of hash out almost line by line what's in the bill, and you'll get a really good sense of the discussion of the major issues there. I also agree that there are significant problems with it and have been supportive of major repeal and reform of it. So I'm happy to, be part of that process. I also wanted to add another bill to your list, and Zainab was gracious enough to testify on it, and that's Senate Bill 220. And that is looking at sort of restorative practice, and it's an opportunity, my bill and Delegate Vaughn Stewart in the House, people who've been accused of hate crimes. It's providing an opportunity for judges to include, with whatever consequences they have, the option of having them participate in an educational program on bias. And hopefully they can learn something about the crimes in which they've been involved. A lot of times we know it's young people who are participating in hate crimes, and this could be a way of getting them to change their ways and understand that the graffiti or whatever it is, the misdemeanor that they've been involved with, if it's that, hopefully it doesn't rise to a larger kind of crime. And the University System of Maryland would be one of the places that would develop that kind of curriculum. So I just thank you for your participation in the legislative process and getting more and more people involved. It's really important. And I appreciate hearing from people in my district too, who let me know how they think. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. Next, if we could, I'll invite Erin Mansour on behalf of Senator Clarence Lamb.
Hi there, I'm Erin Camp Mansour. I'm a legislative aide for Senator Clarence Lamb. Unfortunately, he was unable to be here this afternoon, but he did want me to participate and listen and maybe share just a couple short comments about what he's working on. He typically is of like mind with his colleagues, Senator Gazzoni and Senator Hedelman, who just spoke, in terms of supporting social justice reform and the measures that they already discussed. He does have a couple of bills that relate to some of the topics you've mentioned in terms of SB 46 and HB 231, which is a primary sponsor bill of his that includes that attempts to ban a discriminatory defense tactic that some defendants use in the initiation of hate crimes, which include those of race, ethnicity, and national origin. So that would be something that we're working on in our office that's similar to some of the legislation that you've supported on this call. And then he also has another bill, SB 234 and HB 223. Those are cross-file bills in the House. Pertaining to personal information, state and local agencies. And this has to do with representatives of the state not using, employees not using information that may be available to them for civil immigration enforcement activities without a warrant. So that also sounds like something that might relate to some of the work that you're doing on other bills. So certainly he's supportive, I think, as his colleagues are, of what you're working on. And if there's anything we can do in our office to be supportive or helpful, I know we have a lot of virtual procedures this year, which can be kind of challenging in terms of submitting witness testimony. So if anyone needs additional assistance with that, we're happy to help in any way we can to get through the virtual procedures we're all negotiating this year. So thank you for having us.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for your remarks on behalf of Senator Lamb. Now I want to give Delegate Kaiser the opportunity to come on and say a few words, a few remarks.
Well, thank you so much, and assalamu alaikum to everyone listening today. I'm pleased to be here. I represent District 14 in Montgomery County, and I'm fairly certain that all that I'm saying today would be echoed by my teammates, Senator Craig Zucker and Delegates Eric Lutke and Delegate Pam Queen. We all share that same focus on social justice and all the issues you talked about. I do want to echo what Senator Hedelman said, specifically about your involvement today and your involvement in the process in general. The work that we do can't be done without all of your help and involvement. And we are a citizen legislature, which means not only that we have other jobs, but that we need the input from everyone in terms of all your expertise. So thank you. Please continue reaching out. From all the issues you mentioned, I stand with you in regards to police misconduct, changing the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights about hate crimes, and making false claims when calling the police about an issue. Just one of the issues that was brought up today is in my committee. I chair the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Delegates, and hate crimes legislation about removing hate symbols from Delegate Guyton's was heard Friday during our hearing. So we'll be taking a close look at that. I think it's very important that we make everyone in school feel safe and not feel threatened in any way. So we're going to take a closer look at that legislation. And as you'll learn from all of us, we all have the expertise from our respective committees, and really rely on the expertise of others. So I certainly welcome anyone else who wants to reach out further in regards to that bill, House Bill 418. So again, thank you all for inviting me today.
Thank you so much for your remarks. Now I'd like to invite Delegate Carl Jackson to speak next.
Yes, afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I will say I am proud to sponsor Bill HB 306, which would add making a false statement to a police officer to the list of hate crimes if it's done so based on a person's race, color, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, gender, disability, or national origin. I really believe that we as a state have to do all we can to ensure that we're keeping people safe and protecting them from these kinds of racist behaviors. So I'm so glad to be here. I certainly look forward to supporting many of the bills that was listed there, seeing what makes it out of committee to the floor, and I'm certainly committed to making sure that that Maryland continues to be a more tolerant a state for all people. So again, thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
We appreciate you coming on. Next, I would like to invite Delegate Terry Hill to come on and give her remarks.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you all for putting this virtual event together. It's so strange to be dealing this way, but I guess we're all getting used to it now. So first of all, I wanted to agree with all of my colleagues that your agenda is consistent with my values, and I'm supporting each of the bills that you spoke about. My Senator Clarence Lamb was represented earlier, and you know that he's worked very hard, as have my fellow delegates, Eric Ebersol and Jessica Feldmark, on these issues. So the one bill that I want to bring to your attention, because that's part of the fight we share for not just criminal justice, but social justice and economic justice and environmental justice, is a bill that I'm introducing. It doesn't have a number yet, but what we're trying to do is to ask for the state to begin to be proactive in how we use algorithms, because we know that algorithms can perpetuate the injustices that we are all fighting to eliminate. And so we have a bill to require that vendors who use algorithms in state projects and so can affirm that their algorithms are consistent with our values of equity, and that we are not going to be going forward reinforcing ideals and stereotypes that perpetuate injustice. So we'll be looking for support from those of you who are here on that bill. And again, I support your agenda. I appreciate all the work you do, and I value the relationship we've built with the council and with CARE, both in Baltimore County and in Howard County over the past many years. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to invite Delegate Shanika Henson.
Thank you for the opportunity to address everyone and to hear your really thoughtful presentation. You all at CARE have obviously taken time to go through the legislation this session and find points of legislation that would really uplift and impact our Muslim community here in the state of Maryland. So thank you for your thoughtful and hard work that you've put into this presentation and bringing information to everyone. I am Delegate Shanika Henson. I get the privilege of representing the city of Annapolis and the surrounding parts of Anne Arundel County in the General Assembly. If I can just add to the conversation, one bill that I've sponsored this year, House Bill 1276, Emergency Planning Cultural Competence. We know that in times like this, where we're having unprecedented things that we're facing as challenges, making sure that we're taking an eye towards people's culture, towards people's specific needs when we're setting up things like a disaster relief shelter. Will we have adequate space for people to pray? Are we respecting people's dietary and religious concerns when we're making plans and we're thinking about what our next crisis might be and how we can all survive it together? So I'm hoping to get that bill across the goal line and making sure that even our emergency planning is done with thoughtfulness, care, and intentionality. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Henson. Now I want to give Delegate Emily Shetty the chance to give her remarks.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you today. Thank you for the incredibly thoughtful presentation and all of your engagement in our legislative process this session. It's a unique process, or not unique, it's unique to Maryland's history in that we're doing this virtual session the way that we are given the pandemic. But it's given us an opportunity to really engage members of the public in a way that we've not been able to in the past, because you don't have to leave your home. You can just testify and provide your feedback from wherever you are, which is a wonderful opportunity to share your thoughts on the legislative process and help shape it as it's moving through. I've really enjoyed the opportunity of hearing from CARE on a number of the bills that we've had. I serve on the House Judiciary Committee. Many of the bills that you've prioritized have been heard and will be heard before my committee this session. So I really enjoy hearing your thoughts and welcome the engagement from members of the community. I bring greetings from District 18's delegation, Senator Wallstreicher, Delegate Carr, Delegate Solomon, and myself. We are privileged to represent a diverse community in Montgomery County that includes Wheaton, Garrett Park, Chevy Chase, Kensington, a bit of Silver Spring, and I feel like I've forgotten one. I apologize, but we are here with you. We stand with you. We support your agenda, and we're here to serve your community. So if there's anything that we can do to be supportive, please do not hesitate to reach out to any one of the four of us. And we are grateful for the thoughtful engagement. So thank you so much for your advocacy, and we look forward to connecting soon.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to invite Delegate Lily Cheat to speak.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting us. I apologize for being late. I hope my Chief of Staff was able to join you for the first half of the program. I consider myself a good friend of the Muslim community, and I should have started my greetings with Assalamu alaikum. When I was serving as the Montgomery County Executive's community liaison for the Asian and Middle Eastern communities, I really got some great lessons about community engagement, about government cultural competency. And I learned so much from this community. To this day, I often point to the Muslim community as the role model, as a relatively new community with a lot of Asian Americans in the mix, in terms of your effectiveness in engagement and advocacy and doing some greater good beyond just serving your own communities. So I often tell the Chinese community to learn from you. Thank you for everything you do. So in terms of the legislative agenda, because I'm an immigrant, I'll focus on a couple of things. One is help Maryland and Montgomery County become more competitive, to expand economic opportunities, because that was the #1 reason why so many of us gave up everything to come here. And the second is to make our state more inclusive and make our government more culturally competent. So one of the things I'm very proud was I worked with the State Board of Elections to translate the voter registration form into multiple top spoken languages in Maryland. That has been done without having to introduce a bill, which is even better. And one of the bills I'm introducing that was introduced last session by Delegate Terry Hill, who's still here, is related to home care workers. That workforce is disproportionately women of color, including many people from the Asian American community. And this bill essentially would require the state attorney general's office to provide proper guidance to these home care agencies that are now in very much high demand because of the pandemic. In terms of to provide guidance to the home care agencies that receive public dollars of Medicaid on how they should properly classify their workers so that they could be classified as employees instead of contractors, because misclassification often leads to losing their entitled benefits, including workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, travel time between homes, and et cetera, all being underpaid on wages. I also am reintroducing a bill about national origin discrimination in state and local employment, because I think in order for a government to be truly culturally competent, it has to look like the people we serve. And right now, the state government is disproportionately lacking Latinos and Asians. And that's a point of concern for me. So I hope my bill would help to move the needle in that regard. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Delegate. Lastly, we will have Delegate Sheila Ruth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today. And, living in District 44B, Muslims are an important part of my community. Muslims live, go to school, work, worship, and own businesses in my community. Muslims are friends and neighbors. I've supported the community for a long time, long before I was in the House of Delegates, and I look forward to continuing to support the community and supporting your priorities. I also wanted to mention my House Bill 700, which will repeal the law that makes it a crime to disturb school activities. This law criminalizes normal adolescent behavior. It's disproportionately applied to Black and Brown students and students with disabilities. And it contributes to the school to prison pipeline. We have a hearing on that Wednesday in the Ways and Means Committee, and the sign up for that is tomorrow. I support all of your priorities. I'm not sure any of them come through my committee, but I certainly look forward to supporting them when they come to the floor. I want to echo my colleagues. Please reach out to me anytime. I'm always happy to hear from you, and citizen and resident participation is an important part of the process. And so thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate Ruth. I just want to thank all the delegates and senators for coming on and giving their remarks. Now we will have a Q&A from the audience. I see we already have a couple hands raised. For the first question, Farha Khan. You can ask if you have a question. Or you can type it in the chat as well. Okay, we'll come back to you. Another question that we have for lawmakers is, what is the most effective way to lobby lawmakers? What works and what doesn't? So I'll open the floor up. Anyone who wants to answer can answer.
I would just start with the most effective way is to build that relationship, and not just reaching out the one time you need us, but to inviting us, as many of us already talk to different constituents. I go to many events at mosques in my district, but to take that opportunity to create that relationship. And I'll let others talk about maybe some of the other aspects of how it works well.
Okay. We also have Delegate Saab. So I'll allow them to come onto the screen and give a few remarks.
Hi, my name is Asia. I'm Delegate Saab's legislative assistant here on his behalf. He had another Zoom that looks like there was an overbook in the schedule. Was there a question?
The question is what are the best ways for people to lobby lawmakers?
We're very responsive through email. So if you send us an email with your legislative priorities in a consolidated sheet, it's much easier for me to communicate that with my boss. And he takes everything into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
This is Delegate Terry Hill. I'd like to echo what Chairman Kaiser said and expand a little bit. Every way that you can communicate with us, even when there's not a pressing issue in front of you, builds that relationship. So as you invite us to participate in community events and we accept those invitations, as you participate in events and town halls and things that we have, there's often a tendency for those of us who've been marginalized to focus on the issues that are unique and special to our communities, but there are so many other issues that affect us as well, right? So if you're a business person, there are economic issues that are important to you, and you want to make sure that you let us know how you feel about those issues too, as an example. If you have children or you're a taxpayer, you're concerned about education. So every way that you can communicate, be it email, phone call, participation, if you want to volunteer to work for us, or anything, anytime you can build a relationship of communications and we get to know one another better, we can better represent your concerns and your families. And that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Hill. Let's see if we have any more questions from the audience.
So I think we do have another question, which is how can community members get involved in your offices, like Delegate Terry Hill was just mentioning?
I'll chime in. Just email us. All of our public officials' contact information is on Maryland General Assembly pages, so it's very easy to find us. These days, because we are remote working most of the time, email is probably the easiest way to communicate with us. Just express interest. I got a lot of interest from people, mostly young people, high schools, and even some college students. Saying, they would like to get involved in certain things. And, there are always opportunities to observe and learn. Sometimes I would just say, start by following our hearings or bills that you are interested, that certain subjects that are of interest to you. So and over time, you may come up with ideas of things that you can initiate, or your own bill ideas that you can advance, So there are various ways of getting involved.
Thank you, Delegate.
May I add to that?
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Delegate Ruth.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Delegate Henson. You were first.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. No, I was going to say that was excellent by Delegate Chi. I would also add that there are many opportunities for young people to get involved in the General Assembly in general. There's a page program that's operating virtually this session, but generally it's a great opportunity to come on the House floor and to see the work in action. There's also internship opportunities for our for college students as well. And then each of our offices, we sponsor some scholarship opportunities too. So reaching out around that is a great way to get involved and to be a part of the process as well. But I think there's kind of nothing that's as great as being hands-on with it. So I know we're all looking forward to when we can have people in person again. But for now, most of us are doing virtual office hours where people can drop in without an appointment and spend some time with us virtually and share their concerns and let us know what's most important to them too.
And Delegate Henson beat me to it. I was also going to mention no, it's okay. I was also going to mention the internships. It's obviously it's too late for this session, but for next session, I hope that some of you will apply for internships. It's a great way to get involved. Obviously this year things are very different because we are operating virtually, but please continue to invite us to events, not only large events like this, but community association meetings. I've been to some on Zoom. It's a good way to get to know the community, business association meetings, anything like that. Please send those invitations, and I think we're all happy to participate. My district mates and I will be hosting a district night. We usually have a district night in Annapolis. We can't do that this year, so we will be hosting a district night on Zoom. So I hope to meet some of you there.
Thank you, Delegate Ruth. One more question that we have from the audience is how many bills actually get passed each session generally?
I think about 400 or 500 bills, and you'll learn that sometimes it's the identical bills in the House and Senate, and sometimes are unique bills. But I'm also answering the question in the chat that I can finish the question of how long does it take to get bills approved. I wasn't sure how that question was being asked, and I can finish in the chat as well. Sometimes it takes just one legislative session. Sometimes it takes more than a decade. But if you mean internally to the legislative session, every bill gets assigned to a committee. Every committee has a hearing on that legislation. If the legislation is passed, then the entire chamber, either the House or Senate, considers it. And if they then pass it, the opposite chamber has to consider it. So it's back to history civics class, government 101, but there is a long process with every bill within a legislative session.
And for those who may not know, so our legislative session is 90 days, but we're also available the rest of the year. And many times constituents will come to us during what's called the interim with concerns or ideas that will turn into legislation for the next year. So don't feel that you're limited in only speaking to us during this period. And I see Delegate Acevedo has joined us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue with the questions, I would like to welcome and invite Delegate Gabriel Acevedo to give a few remarks before we continue to the question and answer.
All right, thank you so very much, Nima. Thank you to CARE Maryland. Thank you to Zainab, who I believe I saw earlier, who's also on the Zoom. And thank you to all of the youth activists for your advocacy, for your engagement. I'm always inspired by youth engagement because we all know that every single social movement that has really come about to bring about change in our state and in this country has been started and led by young people. And so I'm always inspired when I see that level of engagement, and I really appreciate seeing that. As was mentioned, my name is Delegate Gabriel Acevedo, and I'm proud to represent District 39 in Montgomery County. It's the northwestern part of Montgomery County. It includes communities of unincorporated Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village, Germantown, Clarksburg, and the town of Washington Grove. It's one of the most diverse districts in the state and in the country, and we have and I'm proud to say that we have a high immigrant and new American communities in my district, and also a growing Muslim community as well, growing and thriving Muslim community in District 39. And so I'm really proud of the work that all of the folks in my district have been doing, especially during this time, to ensure that a lot of our families are able to make ends meet. And I also appreciate the engagement and the advocacy on bills that I have introduced that is a part of CARE's legislative priorities for the 2021 session. And I'm going to touch on a little bit of that in a bit, but I want to allow for a dialogue, certainly with my colleagues and myself, not just on those bills, but on a lot of other priorities as well that have really intersectional importance for the Muslim community. And so when we talk about issues, certainly the social unrest and the protests and the movements that we've been seeing right now around police violence, we have to really pay attention to what is taking place at the federal, at the state, and at the local level. And the reason why that's important is because it is very likely for those in power to pass things that on its face may seem like it's doing something or cosmetic, in other words, but at the heart of it doesn't really address the issues and the concerns that impacted communities have been talking about. And the reason why that's important is because when we talk about police reform, as someone before running for office that has been engaged in this kind of an advocacy around our criminal legal system, I remember in 2015 and 2016, following Freddie Gray's killing, that there was a similar work group that was set up and some ambitious recommendations that came out of that work group around police reform. And that went into legislation. And while a lot of important things were done in that bill, we also know that it didn't go far enough in terms of what communities have been calling for. And so we're here again, and we want to ensure that the work that we're doing this legislative session is not just rooted in the communities most impacted. As I've said before, and I'll continue to say, that those closest to the pain are closest to the solution, but seldom are they closest to power. And our responsibilities as policymakers is to ensure that we're listening to communities, particularly the Muslim community, where the issue of police violence is certainly intersectional. If folks remember the case of Amadou Diallo, who was not just a Black man, but also a Muslim. And oftentimes when you have those various identities that are stereotyped or criminalized, that makes you doubly at risk for whether it's traffic stops, whether it's arrests, prosecution, incarceration, criminalization, surveillance. And we have to really understand that the issue of police violence is not just one that impacts Black communities, but folks that exist at various intersectionalities, right? From the LGBTQ plus community to the Latinx community to Muslims, and certainly to our youth, right? And so we have an opportunity to do something really big this legislative session. I'm optimistic. I have only seen support from my colleagues on these really important bills. And I just want to highlight just a few of them. One is Anton's Law, which in essence is the reforming of the Maryland Public Information Act. It is named after Anton Black, a 19-year-old college athlete that was killed in police custody on the Eastern Shore. And what was clear about that situation is that we had an abusive former law enforcement officer who was not just protected by the system, but was able to operate or in other words, still work in law enforcement despite having a terrible service record and a record of abuse. And so Anton's Law would reform the Maryland Public Information Act to ensure that not only that complainants know the outcome of their complaints, but also it would make police misconduct records public. And the reason why that's critical is because we cannot flag, root out, or address problem cops if we cannot have access or oversight over the very thing that points to the problem, which is police misconduct records. There's a commonality in the case of George Floyd and in the case of Tamir Rice and Eric Garner and so many others that the public only finds out later on, is that these officers have had a history of use of force reports and complaints that in essence went ignored and their records were shielded. And so these abusive cops continue to work within police departments and there is no sense of transparency. And so you cannot hold individuals accountable. And so when we talk about the issue of police violence, it's not just about repealing the LEOBR, but it's about passing Anton's Law because those are complementary legislations. Anton's Law provides transparency. LEOBR ensures that we have a different system of accountability where communities have greater oversight and ending procedural protections for law enforcement. We have to pass both, right? The only reason you all can hold my colleagues and I accountable is because you know what we do. There is a level of transparency. You know the bills that we introduce, you know the way we vote, you know what we support, you know what we vote against, what we abstain from, you know the positions that we take on issues, because there is transparency, and so you can hold us accountable as a result. If there is no transparency in the way that law enforcement do their jobs and police our communities, we cannot hold them accountable. And so if we repeal the LEOBR, but we do not pass Anton's law, we're not really providing real reform, and we're not giving the public a real transparency and accountability, because repealing the LEOBR alone would not do that. I know we're also looking at use of force, independent prosecutions, which would be introduced by legislation would be introduced by some of my colleagues that came out of our work group that the speaker started, established last year. And we did phenomenal work. And I think the speaker should certainly be commended for not just the urgency of creating this work group, but this was something that she was going to establish even before the national protests that we saw, right? And so we did a lot of important work, but there's certainly more to the issue of police accountability that we didn't examine, such as Anton's law, which deals with MPIA reform, such as the issue of police in our schools. And that's another issue that I know a lot of folks are interested in and paying attention to, because what data continues to show is that the presence of police in schools disproportionately impacts Black, Latinx, LGBTQ+, and students with disabilities. And so for those students that exist at those intersectionalities, they're at risk of not just being arrested, but being put into the school to prison pipeline. And we talk about the school to prison pipeline a lot and dismantling it, but let's be clear that we cannot dismantle the school to prison pipeline if we do not also deal with the issue of police-free schools, because police are the first point of contact for the criminal legal system. Before a prosecutor brings case, before a judge adjudicates, before a sentence is rendered, police are in essence the first point of contact. And when we have police in schools who in essence are police officers as a matter of law and have weapons and view students' behavior through the lens of law enforcement, we see what we're seeing right now in terms of the data from the Maryland Department of Education that showed, even though Black students account for a third of enrollment in Maryland public schools, 56% of all of its arrests. We see in Montgomery County, my county, the Office of Legislative Oversight released a report that showed Black students account for a fifth of enrollment in MCPS, but over half of all of its arrests. So we really need to rethink what safety looks like and what it means for all of our students, and whether we're going to continue to criminalize youth for really adolescent and minor behavior and infractions that disrupt their education, that puts them into the school to prison pipeline, that introduces them to the criminal legal system at a very young age, and forces folks to really navigate this complex system. We have to rethink school safety, and we can do that through legislation that Delegate Janelle Wilkins and I have introduced, the Police Free Schools Act, which would end police school districts contracting with outside law enforcement to have an armed SRO or police officer in schools, but also the Counselors Not Cops Act, which in essence would divert the $10 million that annually that is allocated to the SRO programs to hiring more mental health professionals, behavioral specialists, counselors, social workers, more nurses, restorative justice practitioners, the people who are really trained and skilled to deal with youth, their behaviors, and see them as they are, which are children and their inherent humanity, rather than seeing them as criminals. And so while we didn't examine that as a work group, that's also something we need to look at, but also the issue of white nationalism in law enforcement. Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is the chair of the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Subcommittee in Congress, his subcommittee recently released an unredacted FBI assessment that talks about the issue of white nationalism within law enforcement. And that report is very, very disturbing for a lot of our communities. It in essence showed that not only white nationalism is pervasive within law enforcement in the United States, but it has become an attractive profession for white nationalists, not only because of their beliefs, but also the kind of protections that are afforded to law enforcement officers, both in Maryland as well as in the rest of the country. And so we need to deal with the issue of white nationalism because we know that's an intersectional issue for the Muslim community, for the Jewish community, for the LGBTQ plus community, for the Latinx community, for the immigrant community, right? So many of our communities that make up the fabric of America that are threatened by this kind of a presence of white nationalism in law enforcement. We have to do something about it.
I just actually have a question for you on that. For the SRO bill, I just have a question from the audience. For Delegate Acevedo, I'm a student in Baltimore County Public Schools. Thank you for your leadership on the SRO issue. This issue is very personal to me. In addition to the Counselors Not Cops bill, is there any other legislation in the Maryland General Assembly you recommend supporting on this issue? And what can we do to help it pass?
Yes, so the Police Free Schools Act and the Counselors Not Cops Act are really complementary legislation that we've worked on in consultation with advocates, with educators, with impacted communities, with students. And what's clear is that law enforcement in schools do not necessarily keep our kids safe or make them feel safe. And so what makes our kids safe and feel safe is ensuring that we're investing in the people that see our children as children and invested in their affirmation. And so I would suggest that everyone call their state delegates and state senator and tell them to support these very important pieces of legislation that not only ends the criminalization of our youth, but really diverts public dollars to data, evidence-proven solutions. I'll also put in the chat a op-ed that Delegate Wilkins and I co-authored that folks can certainly have a read. We've laid out the data in terms of school shootings and the arguments that folks have made that somehow the presence of law enforcement in schools deters school shootings or ends school shootings. We also look at the data around certainly who is being disproportionately impacted and what really other school districts have done by ending their SRO programs and what that means for school safety. So please reach out to your representatives and let's ensure that we get this done, because this is certainly a Black Lives Matter issue, because if Black Lives Matter outside of our schools, then certainly it should matter within school walls as well.
Thank you, Delegate.
And Delegate Acevedo, and to all of the delegates and senators who are here today with us, on behalf of CARE and the coalition, I do want to take a moment just to interject and thank you for your leadership on some very complicated, very difficult, very challenging issues that historically have continued to unfortunately impact those communities who have been most marginalized and most adversely affected by these issues. These are not easy topics, but these are topics that affect especially those children within our schools and within our communities who are growing up in a society where they are continuously trying to find a way for them to be able to feel incorporated and included and seen and heard within the halls of power and within these spaces. So thank you again for your leadership on this issue. And I know that my organization, I know our coalition partners, the United Maryland Muslim Council, and the other organizations are working to do our part to ensure that our communities are aware and that we're also lobbying lawmakers to help them understand why these issues matter so much to not only our children, but also to children all across the ethnic and religious and racial spectrum who are impacted by them. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate your taking the time out to be here today. We look forward to continuing to work with you and all of your respective offices. And I know we received many messages from lawmakers who were not able to join us today, who wanted to be here, who also are appreciative and supportive. And we will continue to work with them on the issues where we know we can make change to affect positive change within our state.
Thank you, Delegate Acevedo. Zainab. Another question that we have from the audience. How do we make sure that bills move along in committee and make it to the floor for a vote?
Wonder who wants to take that question.
I'll say this, if someone has an answer, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I'm sure Delegate Acevedo was referencing me as a committee chair who gets to make some of that decision along with the Speaker of the House as things move. But things move along when we know that there is support within the legislature, and we consider the trade-offs between the different bills that are out there. And some bills aren't always ready in terms of there's community support, but sometimes some of the nuances and details haven't been worked out. And every bill has those challenges and potential, I can't think of the right word, but potential downsides to them and working them out. So even the best legislation sometimes takes a few years to ensure that all the right people have been talked to and asked questions, and that we've ironed out all the challenges. But what you could do as activists, of course, is to always reach out to your own legislators, to legislators from other communities, and know, of course, that sometimes we don't all agree. So something that sounds good on the surface might not actually be good once you start looking at the details. So Delegate Hill is correct. It's a challenge that we all have in figuring out, because we all put in legislation that we think is good, and then the hearing happens, and then you realize there's a lot of challenges to work through. But as advocates, never stop communicating with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the next question we have from the viewers is to all senators and delegates, and it is there any financial help available to those families who've lost their loved ones for funeral expenses?
To my knowledge, and I would welcome others to add, but to my knowledge, I don't believe we have programs such as that. I know that we have some members who I think are involved or on our appropriations committee who may be better able to answer that. I will say that this past week, we had a hearing on the House on the Governor's Relief Act that sends a lot of state money out to help people, help businesses, help those who have suffered with unemployment this past year. Our state Senate added another $500 million to that. Our House of Delegates is looking at other funding that can help people. I don't know if anything is particularly designed for funerals, but certainly lots of money is being talked about to provide help to people who've really been suffering, especially this past year.
Can add to that, Delegate Acevedo and I serve on the Appropriations Committee. I think the question is framed in the context of the pandemic of COVID-19. I know that the funds that people are getting, a lot of it doesn't have a restriction that would prohibit them from being able to use the funds in that way. Anne Arundel County was able to mobilize some of our casino revenue very early on to get money into the hands of people who lost jobs and were impacted by the pandemic. But in the broader sense, I know that the Crime Victims Resource Center, when someone's lost due to a tragedy, they have some funds that's available to help people with funeral expenses and things that crop up after you suddenly lost someone tragically.
Thank you, Delegate, for your answer. I believe we have one more question from the audience.
Has this been watched?
Yeah.
Many people are having a hard time getting vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines. Where can we get them, and how do we get them? What's the process of getting a COVID-19 vaccine? And is the Maryland General Assembly legislating this process?
Right. No. Okay. So we've got a couple of things when we deal with the vaccine. You've got the stuff, you've got the site, and you've got the staff. We have adequate staff and can, step up the number of people available to administer. We have adequate sites. What we're missing is stuff, which is the vaccine itself. And frankly, we're missing adequate organizational collaboration at the state level, that because of the huge misfires at the federal level up until the last couple of weeks, we haven't adequately addressed. So at this point, and I'm coming as a member of the Health and Government Operations Committee, And as a physician, we can spend hours talking about what's wrong with the system. But at this point, folks should sign up to get the vaccine on any access point that they are able. Okay, so if you qualify as a 1A, B, or C at your local health department, sign up there. If you're a first responder on the front lines and you have a way of signing up there, that's fine. We have to remember that the goal is to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And the sequence at which we do that it's important, but it's also been kind of caught up in some of the, I guess, the hype and some of the scare tactics and the miscommunications. So that up until now, most of us have been managing to live in a pandemic world by taking appropriate cautionary steps, masking, distancing, if we're able to work at home, working from home, if we have to work out, being careful about how we connect and space ourselves and socialize. Now that there's a vaccine available, we need to continue to do the same things. And our lives are not going to dramatically change 2 weeks from now if we get the vaccine. Okay, but because it's now available, some people are, sort of petrified that if they don't get it, something dramatic is going to change. We certainly want our most vulnerable people to get it. There's no question. I saw a comment in the chat earlier that, like with most things in the society that so many of us are trying to change, money, affluence, and access, despite the system, gives you more availability to the vaccine. Because if you're poor and you don't have access to a car, or you're elderly, it doesn't matter if there's a clinic 5 or 10 miles away in your county. If you can't get there, you can't get to the clinic to get the shot. So it's just important that we work to sign up the members of our households who can qualify, to help the members of our neighborhoods who need to get the vaccine by whatever means possible. One of the problems we're having is that if you sign up on 2 or 3 lists and you get your vaccine, you don't come off the other list. So the lists are, artificially longer than they should be. You do need to be responsible about what you're doing, so you're not there to bump other people out of line. But if you qualify and an opportunity comes up, get the vaccine. So I wish I could tell you that there's one site that you could go to. We've been having regular meetings with the Department of Health and the governor's folks, trying to get them to do a little bit more coordination, or at least to follow the leads of the local health departments who have been training for a pandemic for years and are prepared to do the work if they can just get hold of enough vaccine. So no easy answers, but at this point, with a limitation on the stuff, when we offer it through the health department and then we offer it through the pharmacies, that means there's less for the health department. When we offer it directly to the schools, there's less for the health department. So we are not coordinated in a way that makes sure that the priorities are addressed in an equitable fashion. But we can do better, so don't panic. Remember that the things that you've been doing till now will likely keep you safe. And if you qualify, or someone in your household qualifies, sign them up wherever you can. That's my best advice. I wish it were better.
Thank you, Delegate Hill. We have one more question and then we will wrap up. So the last question, I'll open it to any of the lawmakers. What is the process and plan, and what do community members need to know about school reopening in Maryland?
I'll start. The week before last, we had a briefing in the Maryland House of Delegates from Dr. Salmon, the state superintendent of schools. And she talked all about really echoing the governor's comments on schools must reopen on March 1st, and how teachers who say they don't want to be there or don't want to be there and don't care about their students. And the best that I want to say is, I think we all know that almost every student is better served by learning in person. But at the same time, our schools are not necessarily ready facilities wise. The teachers aren't ready. I think the teachers are all concerned that they don't all have their first and second vaccines. I want to assure all of you that I'm sure outside of a few outliers, that teachers want to be back in person. They want to be with their students. They want to be in person. They want to be able to identify when students are having any other type of issues or problems at home. The challenge that we still have across the state is ensuring that the COVID numbers go down and that the schools have the facility resources and the teachers get their shots. And again, it's not just teachers, from the bus drivers to the cafeteria workers to everyone else. So it's very simple for the governor to demand everyone to be back in school. It's a lot harder to actually make it work practically. And I just want to ensure again that everyone understands that most teachers want to be back.
Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. That was the last question, so we will begin and conclude the program. And we actually have one more question from the audience. Do the numbers indicate it's safe to be open, and how should parents be concerned about sending their kids to school?
Okay, I'm going to take a bite following up on, I think Chairman Kaiser was absolutely right. So we have to continue to follow the numbers, and things are going to be different in each local jurisdiction. There is more known now in February 2021 about how the virus is spread and how we can be safe than we knew in March of 2020. So we want to be sure that, and this is one of the things that the unions have been working with the local school boards and superintendents to make sure that we're following the best guidance, but that we aren't, ignoring safety because it's not a convenient thing to pay attention to. Okay. And again, largely because of the way this has rolled out, there is some skepticism about whether, when we tell folks it's safe to go back, whether our word can be trusted. That's the bottom line. So I think it's appropriate to ask the questions, but when you get the supporting data, believe it and act accordingly. If there is no question that there are schools, particularly private schools, who have been open and who have been able to close down, ramp up for a few days at a time, depending on what the local situation was and whether or not people in their schools became infected. Clearly, that's a lot harder when you're at a school with 3,000 students than it is when you're at a school with 300 students. But the principles are the same. So the question was, is it safe? And the answer is yes, but it is safe provided that the numbers in that local area are low enough, that the necessary precautions are in place, and that the people responsible for ensuring the safety are being transparent and honest in their communications. And that's the best that I think we can do, because we're going to be doing this probably into next fall too. And I don't think any of us want to lose a generation of students because we couldn't figure out how to optimize their education going through this really challenging time, which is not the same thing as saying that we want teachers to lay their lives on the line. We do not want that. But there is something in between where we can have people do the job safely by being responsible about what we ask for people to do and how we ask them to do it.
May I just add to that, to the very poignant comments from Delegate Hill? The question of safety, I think, is a very personal question and a personal choice. And it comes down to where people feel they are safe. In my district here, if I had to characterize what I'm hearing from parents, it's that a lot of parents wanted the opportunity to make the choice for themselves. We know that people who wanted to have an option that wasn't provided by public schools had the ability to simply vote with their purse and go someplace else where they could be accommodated for the needs of their particular students. And what I heard from parents was wanting the opportunity to decide. Each of our local boards of education was required in August to submit reopening plans that says how they would, in their estimation, safely reopen a school. And parents in Anne Arundel County have been given a choice of sending their children to an in-person hybrid learning model or staying 100% virtual. And I think that now that people have the opportunity to analyze the data, to review what's there, and then make that choice, that I do see parents making choices that perhaps they thought they wouldn't have initially. But I know that each student is different and their learning needs are different. And we are trying to move to a place where we can accommodate the needs of all students.
Thank you so much. That was the last question. So really quickly, I'd just like to thank all of the delegates, the panelists, and the participants for showing up, participating, and asking such important and relevant questions. It's been more than an honor and a privilege to participate in this wonderful event. I really have rejuvenated hope for our state and for our nation upon learning and working alongside individuals such as yourselves. It's so important for us to remain present, aware, and in clear communication with each other if we are to enact effective change in our nation and state, and to walk together to a brighter, more inclusive, and progressive future. And Huzaifa, if you also wanted to give your closing remarks.
Sure, thanks, Nima. Yeah, I just want to thank all the lawmakers. I want to thank our sponsoring organizations, CARE Maryland, and yeah, I want to thank the participants for asking such thoughtful questions, and I want to thank the lawmakers for giving such thoughtful responses. I also want to thank my co-host Nima. She did a great job co-hosting today. And I also want to ask Dr. Makbul Patel to give a closing dua.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Thank you all for a very wonderful, thoughtful presentation to educate the community, as well as generating a viable support by the lawmakers. And finally, let us come together, bow ourselves before Almighty, gracious God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and offer sincere prayers from the bottom of our hearts. O God, clean our hearts and our minds from arrogancy and hypocrisy. Make us among those who are sincere, humble, and striving to uphold the freedom and justice for all. Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Dr. Patel. And with that, that is our program. Lastly, I just want to let all the participants know to make a strong push on the bills that we went over today. And also wanted to remind everyone that we will be sending out the legislative fact sheets after the program to everyone who registered. I put if you do not get a legislative fact sheet, you can email, I put it earlier in the chat, but I'll put that in right now. But other than that, just want to thank everyone. So enjoy your Sunday. If there's anything anyone else wants to add, feel free.